Welcome to my Pecha Kucha, where I plan to discuss the opioid crisis. I, Luke Devine, will be your narrator for today. The term opioid refers to a certain classification of drugs based on their effects and chemical structures. Opioids provide the effect of relieving pain, which can also produce feelings of euphoria. Doctors commonly prescribe these drugs to patients, but illicit street vendors also sell the substances illegally. There are many different versions of opioids, all with varying degrees of potency. The most common examples are morphine, hydrocodone, oxycodone, heroin, and fentanyl. Opioids are made as a powder and usually pressed into a pill, but exceptions exist such as the cough syrup codeine. Opioid use causes many physical side effects for a person. Short-term effects include slowed heart rate, decreased breathing, dry mouth, drowsiness, nausea, and bowel dysfunction. Long-term use causes issues throughout the body, including hormone, muscle, and nerve malfunction. The main ingredient in opioids is the gummy substance opium, which is found in the seeds of poppy flowers. Poppy flowers were originally discovered in Southeast Asia, but in modern times they have been exported for cultivation across the globe. The production cost of opioids has decreased over time as synthetic chemicals have made the manufacturing process cheaper. Opioid crisis as we know it began in the 1990s as pharmaceutical companies advertised painkillers more and claimed that the substances were not addictive at all. As time went on, more and more people were prescribed the drugs, and the potential for addiction became very obvious. Opioids have a significant impact on the part of the brain responsible for breathing, as the substances slow the heart down and make people relaxed. High doses of opioids can cause a person to stop breathing completely, which creates a high risk of death. Illegal opioids often come in very strong doses, oftentimes deadly. In order to prevent an opioid overdose, a drug called naloxone can be used to reverse all effects that opioids cause. This drug is hard to obtain, however, as access to it is generally restricted by the government to medical professionals and law enforcement officers. The opioid crisis could affect any American, not just those with a history of drug abuse. If a person were to go to the hospital for a serious injury, they may be given opioid painkillers to help with the pain. After a person is cured, they won't physically need the drugs, but the mental addiction would likely take root. The federal government and large pharmaceutical companies are the cause of this crisis occurring. These entities are the suppliers of opioids, so they are the ones that expose the American public to these addictive substances. To make matters worse, all information about the sourcing of opioids is obscured, so it is hard figuring out where they came from. As the supply of medical opioids has increased, so has the supply of illegal opioids. Majority of addicts start opioid consumption from medical supply, but the addiction overtakes them so they turn illegal. From the consumer perspective, it makes sense as the drugs are cheaper, stronger, and don't require a doctor's prescription. Across the entire U.S., prisons are filled with nonviolent drug offenders caught abusing opioids. While in prison, these addicts are not given any treatment, so they must face agonizing withdrawal symptoms. This practice causes offenders to go right back to the drugs once they are released, where they face high risk of overdose due to loss of tolerance. Addicts are viewed in a very negative light by society. Rich people may go to rehab to fix themselves, but poor people end up in jail without the finances to fight legal trouble. People may be too embarrassed to go to rehab, and prisons rarely help opioid addicts, so the problem doesn't go away. The U.S. has spent a ridiculous amount of taxpayer money fighting the opioid crisis. Roughly $100 billion is spent annually on combating opioid use, totaling $1 trillion since 2001. This money is spent on a variety of programs including healthcare, policing, prisons, and treatment centers. Every single day in the U.S., 130 people die due to opioid overdoses. There are over 2 million people diagnosed with opioid use disorder and an additional 10 million people who misused opioids. Some of the strongest cravings and worst withdrawal symptoms of any drug on earth come from opioids. Major pharmaceutical companies continue to profit millions of dollars a year by exploiting people who need opioids to save their lives. Illegal opioid production is also a huge business, as drug cartels in South America make profit in the billions of dollars each and every year. Medicines have been developed to reduce the withdrawal symptoms of opioids, such as methadone and buprenorphine. Effective quitting strategies are usually centered around psychological counseling, which guides addicts to make lifestyle changes, streamlining the quitting process. Opioids have prematurely claimed the lives of many famous musicians throughout recent history. Many rock musicians in the past have died from opioids, such as Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain. Opioid deaths have not stopped, as more recent examples include Tom Petty and Mac Miller. Opioid use has been attributed to many deaths in Hollywood, from actors and actresses to comedians to directors. Debbie Linden and Philip Seymour Hoffman both died due to heroin overdoses, while Chris Farley and John Belushi both passed away from a combination of heroin and cocaine. In conclusion, the opioid crisis is an epidemic that plagues millions of Americans each and every day. Large medical corporations and drug cartels continue to profit millions of dollars from this crisis, and the U.S. government has taken very little action to fix it and solve the issue.